All right, everyone, thank you, and welcome to Digital Advertising in Politics, Part 1, Nonprofits, Advocates, and Activists. So this session is obviously designed for people who aren't necessarily working with political campaigns. You may be out there in a C3 or C4 role doing voter turnout. You may be doing advocacy work. You may just be doing organizational development work like list building or fundraising. We're going to cover a lot of those use cases in as much detail as we have time for in the next 55 minutes or so. I am trying to reserve time at the end for questions. And I will note that the Center for Digital Strategy is having a gentleman named Brad Caldana. If you Google him, Brad Caldana, you will find links to some events that he is holding, one tomorrow, and then in July that will go into this topic in some detail as well. And then next week, I have a second training that is specifically for campaigns. And we will cover some of the same ground we're covering here, but with a very different emphasis and some different considerations. So with that in mind, let us get right into it. But of course, first, 1 second, there we go. Whoops. So first, though, who am I to tell you what to do? Well, I'm Colin Delany. I don't know if we've met, but if we haven't, I've spent more than a quarter century in the world of digital politics and advocacy, getting started way, way back in the day, back when we were using Usenet news groups for marketing. Look those up if you have a chance. Email was in, I was talking to people who still didn't have email back in 97. We had websites and that was about it. But over the years, I've been able to grow with the field. And in the last dozen years, I've really gotten into digital advertising in a big way. I've been in-house at a couple of nonprofits over the years, and I've worked with literally scores of other nonprofits as I've gone along. And it's been a great pleasure. I really love this field, and I hope that my enthusiasm for it carries through. I'm also the founder and editor of epolitics.com, a website dedicated to the craft of digital politics, which has been taking a little hiatus for the last couple of years, but I'm in the process of restarting. I'm also author of the ebook you see to the right, which is naturally available at epolitics.com, and is going to cover a lot of these topics in more detail. I play rock and roll. That was me Friday there on the right. We played a gig in Mount Pleasant, DC. But in more detail, I do digital advertising strategy. I also do ad placement for programmatic ads, connected TV, streaming ads, banner ads, Facebook if needed, organizational digital strategy. I go in and do audits of digital programs and digital advocacy, particularly email strategy, list building, social media strategy, digital project planning and execution. If it's out there, I've either done it or probably know somebody who has. So anyway, enough about me. Let's talk about politics. We're doing this, political advocacy. Sometimes people treat it as a softer subject than, say, hard-edged campaigning. But I got my political start in the great state of Texas, working in the Texas legislature. And in Texas, politics is a contact sport. So that has informed my approach to political advocacy. Very much on the ground, very much nuts and bolts, and very much focused on getting actual results. Now, sometimes, in the nonprofit world in particular, yes, Lisa, it was Mark's Cafe. Good eye that I played in last Friday. I have a very pragmatic approach to getting this done. So we want to not advertise just to spend money. We don't want to advertise to meet some process goal. We want to advertise to try to change the world one way or another. So why do we advertise online? Well, that's because that's where the people are, right? And we want to mobilize that torch-wielding mob to be speaking on our behalf, not against us. So there are a lot of possible goals you can have. You can see a huge list right here: build lists, raise money, sell merchandise, which can be, for some organizations, can actually be a really good thing. the local library here has been selling T-shirts. I think they're selling nationally too. But change opinions, pressure decision makers. That's one that I'm going to talk about a lot today because it's so central to the advocacy process. If you don't like the word pressure, let's say encourage decision makers to make the right decisions. But you can also try to influence the broader online discussion, particularly in places like Twitter. You can try to recruit volunteers. Great, a great option often for smaller or for locally focused organizations. You try to drive people to your website, highlight, particularly valuable content. And often, though, we are reinforcing other parts of an online campaign. I'll give just one tiny example of this. I mean, it's been found over the years that let's say you have an audience of 1,000 or 10,000 people that you're going to send a fundraising message to, well, a fundraising email to, or a fundraising text. If you can target those same people on, say, Facebook or some other digital channel with an advertisement tied to the fundraising message, echoing it thematically or even visually, you can run those a few days beforehand and a few days afterwards. And people have found, perhaps not always, but have sometimes found that they will raise way more than enough money to cover the ads, i.e. the ads sparked extra donations through the email, right? And we'll talk more about that idea as we go. But I want to also note that, of course, we can try to get people to vote. And we can try to do it in a C3 kind of way if we have to, right? Talking about voting in the abstract is not quite as much fun as talking about how terrible the other side is. But when you're in the C3 world, you have to be a little careful about what you do with electioneering. But still, there are ways to do that. If you're a C4, of course, then the gloves are off. So now sometimes your goal is just to spread disarray. This is, I love this ad so much. This is one of the pieces of content that the Russians were pushing back in 2016. Mullet Jesus is my hero. So I doubt these ads made the slightest bit of a difference, but who knows? So let's look at some more, say, contemporary examples. Let's talk about targeting Congress, because that is happening every day. The 3 ads, that are actual screenshots of ads there are, I pulled them off of the Washington Post, Axios, and I believe Semaphore, all, political publications. The Post is broader, obviously, but this was a political ad in the Post trying to reach a political audience. The audience for these is, decision makers. It's the Hill staff. It's allied organizations that need a little help in their messaging. But basically, they're trying to get to decision makers. Now, these are digital only, but notice that, down there in the right-hand corner, I have an example of a physical real-world billboard ad from ACLU. So when I used to work at the National Environmental Trust back 15 years ago, we did a lot of very focused Capitol Hill communications. So we would be running online ads on the National Journal publications, Congress Daily, things that used to reach the Hill. I don't even know if they still exist anymore. But we would be running ads in the metro stations by Capitol Hill when you could still do political ads in metro. We would run them in the bus stops. We ran targeted cable ads in the neighborhoods right around Capitol Hill during the Sunday morning talk shows, i.e. when members and staff might really be watching. So all of these, and of course we had lobbyists on the Hill, and we had, our grassroots supporters sending emails and making phone calls to their members. So it wasn't just the ads. I did get to make some fun banner ads back then. It wasn't just the ads, though. It was the integration of all the pieces. That everywhere a Hill staffer looked, it seemed there was our messaging. And that is the kind of, I call that the illusion of ubiquity, right? You're not really ubiquitous, you're just ubiquitous in the places that these people are looking. So the digital targeting we're going to talk about in more detail is the kind of thing that lets you do this sort of high precision work. Now let's look at state legislators. That lovely building is where I spent 4.5 years of my 4.5 formative years of my youth. That is the Texas Capitol. And if you want to target a state ledge, it's even often more effective, I would think, than targeting Congress, because state legislators simply aren't getting hit with as many messages. Congress, they have very strong, shields. They ward off most of our messaging. A state legislator may well be more, shall we say, easier to influence. Certainly, your message is more likely to stand out from the pack. It's less likely to be drowned out. Similarly, corporate targets. I love corporate headquarters. I've run ads targeting specific federal agencies. You can do the same with state agencies. In those cases, you're not targeting the agency, of course, you're targeting the people who work there, perhaps via zip code, or we'll talk a little bit about geofencing, where you can just draw a line on a map and target the people inside that. But narrowing down your targeting is often a really important consideration, because if you cast your ads out upon the waters, throw them out into the ocean and they're going to, dissolve and not really get seen by anybody. Throw them into a small pond and they're going to be a lot more obvious. So where do ads come from? Well, soon our friends and future masters, the robots, may generate all of them, in which case I expect them to be bland, boring, and repetitive even more than the current crop is. But in the real world, we are not quite there yet. So often one of the serious obstacles is creating content for ads, right? Now, generally, you're going to start with internal brainstorming, which may be assisted by AI, right? A lot of people are using AI for to come up with Facebook ad drafts that they might not have thought of, for instance, to go out and test in the world and see if they actually work in practice. But generally, whether it's computer assisted or not, you're going to have a brainstorming session, or many, and come up with ideas that could be turned into ads. Often they'll naturally be an offshoot of some work that you're doing, right? But then you're going to have to, you're going to need the ad elements themselves. And that's typically where graphic designers and video designers come in. Graphic designers, of course, for still ads, and then video people for the ads that move. Now, if you're an organization that has those people in-house, God love you, and I wish there were more like you. That's hard to do, right? It's those folks are expensive to have around. So most of us, especially down the size chain, have to get by without that in-house specialization. So then you're probably going to have to end up turning to a graphic designer or a video designer, or a straight up ad consulting firm. And there are plenty out there. People who, the one big advantage of using an outside vendor is that they've likely worked with a lot of other people. Well, I hope they've worked with a lot of other people. Otherwise, you probably might want to take a second glance at them. But they're going to be able to apply lessons from many other campaigns to your work, right? But again, there are certainly situations where you can run the entire process in-house. And we'll talk more about that in just a second. You may be able to work with partners too. You create content and pass it to a partner who then is able to pay for the ads and run the ads themselves. Coalitions can be a pain to work in, but this is one way where they can really help you amplify your work if you are good at creating content and they are good at distributing it. And of course, you can ads may come from external sources. Particularly in the political campaign world, there are groups out there trying to make videos for Democratic down ballot candidates, sometimes whether they want those videos or not. But you may be given a really good piece of video or some really strong imagery that naturally lends itself to being turned into a banner ad. Now, AI video and image generators may be able to help, but you have got to check that work carefully. We see all kinds of things where, for instance, someone wants to show American soldiers and the AI shows Russian soldiers, which anyone who knows the difference between the uniforms can tell, or the equipment can tell at a glance. So do be careful. As always, your mileage may vary. So again, I am blasting through this content because we have a lot to cover. So I am recording this, and of course, I will be sending the link afterwards. And if you do have questions after you've listened to the whole thing, and we've done Q&A at the end, drop me a line. You'll be hearing from me when this is over with a video link. So some ads you can do yourself, right? I'm sure that many of you have bought Facebook ads. Many of you have administered Google grants or Google ads for nonprofits. Some of you may have run LinkedIn ads, promoted tweets, although promoted tweets are apparently, especially political ones, are apparently very hard to keep running. They're officially back, but they are apparently hard to keep running these days. I haven't tried them in a year or two. So I want to point out another option for, particularly for C4 groups, doing electioneering, that DS Political, which is one of the main vendor I use for programmatic advertising, which again we'll talk about, has a self-serve platform called democraticads.com. So basically, you go in. You can, I believe, use some of their content templates, or perhaps you have your own video ad. You can upload it, select audiences, and it's pretty cost effective to do it that way. Or, of course, you can go through vendors. And for certain kinds of advertising, you almost certainly have to go through a vendor. And we'll get into that a little bit more. So when we're talking about content, and we're talking about, the top level considerations, you have to think about landing pages, right? Because, yes, quick question from Allison Smith. Candidates can absolutely use democraticads.com. It is designed for them. Thanks for that clarification. You have to think about landing pages because an ad starts the process, right? The landing page is what seals the deal. And, let's step into the Wayback Machine here and go back to 2016. Heck, this may have been 2015 all the way back. So the ad on the left was a Facebook ad, and the top image on the right is a screenshot of the landing page that the ad went to. So when you click Sign Me Up, and you'll notice the action links are red for a very good reason, because we respond to red emotionally. There are those who theorize it's because it's the color of blood. But if you notice on websites, donate pages are red, action buttons are typically a brighter color. But in this case, you click Sign Me Up and you land on the page on the top right. Same outfit, same color scheme, similar font. It's all nicely, tied together. But was that her normal donation landing page? No, it was not. If you went to the website, you would see and you clicked on donate or sign up, you would see there it is, hillaryclinton.com/join. You would see the image there that is in the bottom right, different facial expression, similar red, but different outfit. It has just been shown by repeated testing that echoing the ad, the elements of the ad, the creative elements of the ad, echoing them in the landing page tends to boost performance of the landing page, i.e. more people will take the action, probably because they feel like they're part of a process. If you give them something new, you're interrupting their thinking. So landing pages, they are lurking in the background of just about everything we talk about today. So let us get into targeting. Now, targeting is getting more and more sophisticated all the time. There is a lot of hype around micro-targeting, right? Like, you go back 10 years ago, especially after the Obama campaign had used data so heavily in 2012, there was sort of hype-driven coverage that micro-targeting was going to allow advertisers to manipulate us. Well, I've seen a lot of laundry detergent ads on television, and I don't know how much they've actually influenced my buying decisions. I think what my mom bought when I was a kid probably has more influence on that. In other words, we're somewhat immune. We've developed an immune system against advertising. So the best targeting can, if it's effective, can put the right content in front of the right person. But that doesn't mean that they're going to look at it or that they're going to respond to it. So I just want to, put that caveat in. That's one reason that ads have to be run so many times at the same audience to have much of an effect. And again, we'll talk more about that later when we get to best practices. But at a top level, geographic targeting, pretty straightforward. If you've done Facebook ads, you may well have done that. Interest targeting, that's a Facebook category, but there are also data models that depend on that. Demographic targeting, custom audience, which is where you upload a list, voter file, targeting based on behavior. So let's look at all of those in a little more detail. So there on the right is a map of the new Virginia Senate District 13. And right now, I am pleased to be running ads in support of a Democratic candidate there. We're running video ads, we're running streaming ads, and we're running banner ads targeting potential Democratic primary voters in that area. So you'll notice that there are a lot of squiggles in there, right? That is not exactly a square or any other regular polygon. So this is where the geotargeting can get pretty complicated. Now, you can, one of the cool things is, now, most systems you're going to use for politics will have they're specifically designed for politics, will have district lines built in. But if you're using something like, say, Facebook, you may well have to assemble a list of zip codes to target specifically. I had to do that last year a bunch. But you can draw arbitrary lines, which is geofencing. So for a particular project for a whistleblower organization a few years ago, I was running ads that were targeting 6 ports, like the Port of Houston, the Port of Long Beach, the Port of New York, New Jersey. It was over illegal smuggling, basically animal smuggling, human trafficking, that kind of thing, trying to recruit whistleblowers. But basically the vendor we used just on a map drew a line around each of those port facilities, and people whose phones moved in and out of those areas would have a chance to see our ads. This was on LinkedIn in particular. So you can do that kind of arbitrary targeting. It's great for hitting corporate campuses if you have a corporate target for your advocacy. Again, also useful for state ledge, or that's when we get into those, like targeting the agency headquarters. I was targeting the headquarters of the National Park System over some climate stuff a couple of years ago. So that is called geofencing. So if you hear geofencing, now you can sound all sophisticated and stuff and tell people what it is. So let's talk demo targeting. Age, race, gender, voter status, voting propensity, meaning the likelihood that someone will turn out, a partisan score, Democrat, Republican, digital consumption, are they online a ton? Or are they not online a ton? If they're not online a ton, they may not see your ads enough for you to need to target them, basically. These sorts of parameters are built into, obviously, things like Facebook, things like LinkedIn. The voting status, voter propensity, partisan score, those are going to be coming out of data models that are put together by vendors. On the Democratic side, it's commonly things like Catalyst or Target Smart. There are other vendors that are nonpartisan, like L2 or Aristotle. When I'm using those, I'm rarely using a file directly from the vendor or from the data company. I'm usually using that file that's been built into an advertising platform. But that's ultimately where a lot of this stuff comes from. Income can be a very useful one. Say I am trying to mobilize lower income non-voters. We're trying to do a registration push. That these are folks who've been left behind by a lot of the voter turnout operations, right? So folks that have not registered, how do we find them? Well, we go into a political system like Democratic Ads or Deploy, the DS Political's other platform, and we pick unregistered versus registered voters and start to try to target them. And then we set our income, our age, race, gender, et cetera. The main reason you're doing things like this is, sometimes you're trying to feed a particular message to a particular segment of the audience, but a lot of times you're just trying to, constrain the number of targets you're reaching so that you can hit them enough times with the budget you have for it to make a difference. If you only have the budget to reach people once, that's probably not going to make the slightest bit of difference. You've really got to hit them more like 15 or 20 times. And so by constraining the targeting, you're able to get the audience small enough that your ads have a chance to make a difference, a chance to persuade. So what I labeled here, specific targeting, this is where you're getting lists. Maybe it's a list of past donors to an organization, or it's an export from the voter file, a data model from a data vendor of, say, Asian American voters in the 3rd Congressional District of California, or people who are modeled to meet other characteristics that indicate they're a potential supporter, right? Perhaps they give heavily to environmental causes, and you're an environmental group trying to build your list. So you may get a list from a vendor and start targeting those folks, start basically dangling bait in front of them and getting them to bait in the form of ads. Now, some of you may be very familiar with Facebook custom audiences. A common use of a custom audience is to take your own email list, upload it into, say, Facebook, and target those folks with ads. Perhaps you have a fundraising appeal, as I mentioned earlier. So you've uploaded your email list, you've turned those folks into an audience, and now you want to send content specifically to them. But you could also take that custom audience and do what's called a lookalike. And again, in something like Facebook, this is just a setting. In other systems, the vendors may have to tweak the knobs behind the scenes, but you're taking a list of people, and then the data analytics programs will go find other folks in the wild who are they look a lot like the people in the audience you've uploaded. I know I talked a long time ago with a friend of mine who's a political consultant from Romania and works all around the world. And he uses a political party's email list and then lookalike targeting to begin to build a broader list, to begin to broaden their audience. And so this is something that lookalike audiences, custom audiences together can be very, very powerful. But a lot of times, if you're doing political work, your custom audience is a voter file export. You're exporting people. The trick, not exporting people, you are exporting the names, addresses, and phone numbers of people. The one problem with going with and again, if you've done Facebook custom audiences, you may see this, it can be difficult at times to match the people from your list to the people who use the platform through which you're going to run the run the ads. If, for instance, you don't have an email address for someone in a custom audience, Facebook is going to have a hard time matching them. Now, the problem comes in when you have an email address, but it's not the same address they use in Facebook. This has been a real limitation on voter file exports that I've seen. Allison Smith asks, when you say lookalike, what kinds of characteristics is Facebook looking for? That is an excellent question. No one knows. That is hidden as one of the great mysteries of the Facebook algorithm. Facebook is generating lookalikes based on everything you've ever done on Facebook and all data that Facebook has collected from third-party websites that you've been on that use a Facebook pixel. Yeah. So it's whoa is the correct answer. Allison put it in the chat there. So yeah, that's a lookalike audience. Nothing creepy to see here. All right, so let's check one more question there. I had someone tell me that Facebook uses 100 pieces of data to make these matches. Nathan, that's a good point. I don't know. I suspect it's way, way, way more than that, because I suspect there are behavioral factors in there, like what links you click on and things like that. But who knows? The great mysteries of our time, the Yeti and the Facebook algorithm. All right, let's move on here. And thanks, guys, for the questions as we're going. It gives me time for asides, gives me time to catch my breath. And it helps make sure that we cover everything we ought to cover. Now, I'm sorry, this lightning can strike twice here. When I was talking about behavioral, targeting. One of the things that's pretty common out there is retargeting someone based on something that they did. If you have been followed around by the Zappos was one of the first to jump on this back in the day. You'd look at some shoes on Zappos, and then you'd see some shoes. You'd see ads for shoes, those or something related, following you all around. When I was looking for some fresh digital ad examples this morning, I was having problems because it's funny, on this slide, I have the name of a co-presenter, the Twitter handle of a co-presenter from 5 years ago. I forgot to take that off. But I was having trouble finding good examples of advocacy ads because I was looking at black T-shirts the other day because American Apparel's not making the ones I like anymore. So all of my ads were black T-shirts. Yeah, they were drowning out the political ads, which was frustrating in this case. So anyway, you go to a website or you interact with an online ad, or you engage with a piece of Facebook content that gets turned into an engagement audience, and you can turn around and retarget folks with ads who've done that. So in the nonprofit space, a common use might be you have a tracking pixel from Facebook embedded in the code. Now, this is something your techie would do, right? Embedded in the code of your website templates. So then when someone goes to your donation page, it gets registered, but then it also gets registered if they don't complete the donation. So that then you could potentially target people who go to the landing page, but don't make a donation. You could target them with a follow-up. So we have one more question here. Let's see. Again, retargeting, unless you get rid of cookies entirely, it's not going away. The thing is, though, it is contextual, right? This is something you were interested in, and it works because it catches you. Basically, it's exploiting your earlier interest in something. And I've known of some nonprofits who've gotten really good results by targeting incomplete donations or people who start an advocacy action and don't finish it. But again, that's something you have to be prepared for, have the technical systems set up, and then have your human systems set up to be able to run the ads quickly enough to catch folks when this thing is still on their mind. All right, so let's keep going here. Wow, all right. So let's start getting down to the nitty gritty. So what kinds of ads are there? A lot, and more all the time, it seems like. I'm going to talk a good bit about programmatic banner and video ads. And these are called programmatic because there is a set of computer programs in the background deciding who sees what in milliseconds. So when you go to a website and there's that little pause before the ad fills in, one thing that's happening in the background is a bidding process that is determining who gets to buy the ad there based on their bid, and probably the other factors going into it that I won't speculate on right now. But basically, the ad gets shown to a person, or rather to a device, right? Because they don't know who you are necessarily, but they know your device ID and the cookies that are embedded on your machine. So when I'm running programmatic ads, they may run on dozens or hundreds or thousands of websites, right? They're following the people, not the website. So it's very different from something like Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn, or from, say, buying ads directly from the Washington Post or something like that, that these are going to show up all over the place. I was looking at Politico earlier, and most of their ad units seem to be programmatic because they were showing me T-shirts, right? For voter contact, this is particularly important, right? Right now in that District 13 in Senate District 13 of Virginia, I'm targeting one of the ad flights I'm using is targeting African-American women, 45 years old and older, who lean Democratic and have a reasonably high chance of turning out to vote, right? I enter those parameters the system I'm using goes and knocks on the door of the ad vendor, or of the the massive advertising network that serves up billions of ads a day, and says, here are the people we need to reach, and here's how much that we're willing to pay for it. And then your ads, assuming that you're not being completely outbid out there in the world, your ads start showing up. Now, the bidding process is invisible to us. It's people at trade desks making, decisions about, massive quantities of content at the time. The end result is when one of the people I'm trying to reach is looking at an online video on a fashion site or a sports site or a political site or a general interest, a knitting website, who knows? Wherever they are, if it's got a programmatic ad unit, I have a chance to reach them. And that's with both video and with banner ads. And I'll often run video and banner ads together because banners are real cheap and they can give you an extra chance to reinforce the message or reinforce the candidate's name. Now, CTV, I want to talk about a little bit. It's also referred to as OTT because it is over the top of the cable box, whatever. It's streaming. So we're talking things like Peacock, Hulu, Freevee on Amazon. Oh, there's the other big free TV thing, Pluto, I think. Yeah. So basically your ads are appearing there. And if I'm going, now this, again, with programmatic ads and CTV and banner ads, you're generally in the realm of needing to go through a vendor, someone like me or someone like a bigger ad agency. Although democraticads.com has access to some of this. But if you want to do more sophisticated, more intricate campaigns that a self-serve platform's not set up for, you got to go through someone who's equipped to do that. But so anyway, CTV, OTT was just kind of talked about, say 4 years ago, 5 years ago, but nowadays it's a pretty big deal, particularly in the campaign world. But if you're trying to do persuasion work out there, you can imagine that having an ad on a TV screen rather than just a video ad on your phone has the potential to have a much bigger impact on people. And of course, that means it's going to cost a lot more. Connected TV, CTV ads typically cost 3 or 4 times as much as a programmatic video ad. So as Cookie Monster would say, they're probably more of a sometimes food, right? That your basic breakfast is going to be programmatic video, banner ads, social media ads, that kind of thing. But when you really, really, really need to reach people with something on a big screen, the CTV has become quite available and quite accessible now. Now, when I say cost 4 times as much, 3 times as much, if I'm pricing programmatic ads, ads are typically priced in what's called CPM, which is cost per thousand, right? The M from the Latin. A banner ad might be $7 or $8 a thousand. Programmatic ads might be 16 to 20 a thousand. Where connected TV ads, streaming ads might be more like $50 or $60 for 1,000. So depending on your budget, depending on your targets, depending on their media habits, you've got to allocate that mix. So I've talked a lot about these because I think a lot of folks are less familiar, and I know there are a couple of in detail questions in there in the chat. So I want to get to that after I have a chance to dig through some more of these. Now, we can take the next 3 there, LinkedIn, Google, and Facebook. These are the ones that folks are going to be a little more familiar with. Twitter as well, I would put in there. I don't know if you've looked at LinkedIn ads. They can be very powerful for reaching people in particular professions, right? I do a training every year for doctors through the American Medical Association, for doctors who may run for office one day. And they encourage their members to use LinkedIn because so many members of their profession are on there and they're targetable by profession. So if you're doing some kind of outreach, persuasion, recruiting campaign that is trying to reach people with particular job titles, this is something you might think about. So Google Ads, search ads, Google does have an extended content network that works a little like programmatic. Most of us are going to use them for search ads, and for nonprofits, typically through a nonprofit Google grant, which, if you haven't heard of, Google will give you up to, off the bat, up to $10,000 in free search advertising with some constraints on it, of course. And it's a tax write-off for them. So that's why they do it. But I know a lot of folks have gotten experience using Google ads through a Google grant. And these are search ads, of course. They target people when they're looking for something, and they really reward experimentation, which we'll talk about in a bit too. And then Facebook, of course, we've been alluding to all along the way. So let's jump to the next group there, because I think they get overlooked a lot. Media websites. I'll have some examples further on. But if say you're a locally based organization, or somebody who's working on a ballot initiative or a referendum, that's something where you may need to make a splash in a local area, like doing a homepage takeover of the local newspaper website or the local TV station, TV news website. That can often be very cost effective and it's surprisingly easy to do, because all you got to do is talk to the media buyers there, or the media salespeople there, and they would probably be happy to do that for you. You see it sometimes in the Washington Post. I'll have an example in a sec, but I think that the more local you get, the more folks are likely to really notice. The more, again, just like when I was talking about targeting state legislatures, there's going to be less competition at the local level. So doing something like that with a splash can really stand out. My friend Lauren Miller likes to recommend this for things like the first day of early voting. But it can also be, maybe you want to highlight a local partner. You want to highlight an upcoming event, things that you're trying to get people to. I would encourage you to look at niche publications like local websites. Email lists are similar. Substack newsletters, specialty newsletters like political newsletters in a state, or here in DC you have the old Energy Environment News, E&E News. I forget who owns them now, but there are niche publications that you can run highly focused ads at really tight audiences. When I put out my ebook this year, the new 2023 edition of my ebook, I ran a classified ad on the website Political Wire, which gets a lot of, it's a classified ad because it shows up at the bottom of the page, but it gets a lot of political junkies, political reporters, and political campaign people. So for me, I sold a few books from it, but it was also good name recognition for me as a consultant and writer. So there are lots of applications for this. Podcasts are similar. You may take out an audio ad, or you may have an ad on a podcast landing page. Digital radio, a couple, I forget off the top of my head which ones do it and which ones don't. I think Pandora doesn't, but Spotify does, but I could have that backwards. The trick with digital radio, internet radio, is that it can be really hard to get enough repetitions on the same person to have the sort of persuasion effect. The benefit is, just like terrestrial radio, radio is kind of a very involving medium. It's you're sort of creating the story in your head, you're visualizing as you go, and you can tap into that with audio ads. But again, it can be tough to get enough repetitions to break through. And then finally, I'll note influencer marketing. There are firms out there that will connect you with influencers who will take money to promote your content. You can also reach out to people directly yourself. And that's really useful if you have a good handle on your audience and you have a sense of who they listen to. And when I say your audience, meaning the particular audience for this particular portion of your online outreach, not necessarily the broad audience for your organization. Allison asked, would you recommend local media websites for local candidates? Absolutely. And nail it down early. If you're going to run ads on the first day of early voting, you want to get that before the opponent does, right? All right, so let's look at, we're going to dive into pluses and minuses a little bit more here. So video ads, and I'll put banner ads in with the video ads. So the programmatic video I was talking about, which usually runs pre-roll, i.e. before an online video on a news, sports, fashion, whatever website. And then CTV streaming, they're good for persuasion, and sometimes they're good for direct response. If you're the International Rescue Committee, when something horrible is happening out in the world, let's say in Sudan recently, you might be able to get good results with a highly targeted video ads, in the same way that the ads about the sad children and sick puppies that try to make me cry on television do, right? So but in the political space, and the advocacy space, it's more for persuasion and awareness raising. When you're trying to besiege those state legislators, here's a good way to put your message in front of them. They can often be more affordable than you think. Again, $15 to $20 cost per thousand for the video for programmatic itself. Not so great for fundraising by all accounts. I'm sure that there are individual campaigns and organizations that have been able to fundraise through programmatic, but I haven't seen a ton of case studies about it. And then, of course, unlike Facebook or something, there's no peer-to-peer social component, where social ads, good for audience building, engagement, some niche targeting, although a lot of the niche interest targeting we used to be able to do has gone away. In the past, it's often also been pretty good for fundraising, right? I'll show some examples in a minute, but a lot of the feedback loops that used to help you really refine an audience, like for instance, you're running fundraising ads, and then as people are clicking on the ads and taking action, you're taking those folks, turning them into an engagement audience, turning that into a lookalike audience, and then trying to find other folks who are like the people who are donating to you. But between Apple's privacy changes and Facebook's own changes, the fundraising seems to be less effective than it used to be. So it may turn out that the petition sites like Care2 or Civic Shout are gonna, really pop back up for list building and fundraising. Facebook had been competing with them pretty heavily for a long time. Now, social ads, not as great for website visits. People on Facebook tend not to want to leave Facebook, right? Very common to get more likes, comments, and thumbs ups than it is to get clicks on a piece of content. So you can get 100 likes and 2 clicks, and if your goal was clicks, that's not really helping you very much. And then as we've gone through the years, social ads have just generally become less cost effective. Facebook is a pain in the butt. And then you have problems, as I mentioned earlier, trying to match custom audiences based on identifiers like email and phone number. It's just not so easy. Sometimes you can upload a list and you're really only matching a third of it, but Facebook doesn't tell you that. You can only figure it out later when you get a sense of how many people are clicking. So again, I'm not saying don't use Facebook ads, but I will note that in my own work around political campaigns in the fall, 3 years ago, I might have had 30 or 40% allocated to Facebook, Instagram, but nowadays that might be 5%, right? Because the programmatic banners and video and the streaming seem to be, even the streaming can be more cost effective than Facebook sometimes. I have seen remarkably high costs for well-tested video content. So moving on, we've got just a couple more places to go. Search ads, good for targeting people when they're interested in something, good for website visits. They're quick, so they can be quite good for rapid response. If something bad is happening or something good is happening, and people are searching for it, you can jump on that real quick. Otherwise, again, unless you're going out on the broader Google content network, they're pretty limited. And then with podcasts and niche publications, specific audiences, the details in the content will depend on the outlet channel. Some of the systems that are out there now, there are basically sponsored content is getting packaged in more standardized formats. So it's getting a little easier to buy, like programmatic ads, but we'll see how that works in practice. They may be quite cost effective. It really depends, right? It depends on the publication. The podcaster may be happy to get $7 and a quarter. Who knows, right? But these are some things to look at. And again, it's largely outlet by outlet. Influencer marketing similarly. So good practices, and we're getting toward the end here. I'm going to have a last few examples, and then we'll see what other questions have popped up. So tailor your presentation to the medium. And this is really, really, really important with video ads. A lot of times you will see companies, corporate brands or political campaigns simply take a TV ad and put it online. Well, the problem with that is you've got about 2 seconds to get someone's attention. It's really particularly true with Facebook video, right? Because it is so easy for people to scroll by. But even a pre-roll video, even if you're using high quality inventory, after a few seconds, a lot of folks are going to have the option to click through. You'll see that commonly on YouTube ads, for example. And YouTube ads, I left them out of here. They're a separate category. They have some limitations. They're not as targetable as programmatic, but there may be times where a YouTube ad is a really good practice. But we'll talk about that another day. But tailor your presentation to the medium. Just like a Facebook ad needs to have a strong visual, a Facebook still image ad needs to have a really strong video. I mean, a strong visual. A video ad needs to start with a bang. The other good practice is repeat, 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 repeat. As I've said, 15 to 20 times to start to change someone's mind. Appeal to emotions whenever possible. Make the action as easy as possible for them to do too. But go to the heart, go to the values, go less to the brain, because that just simply in practice doesn't work as well. When you can test, right? See a lot of trainings out there on A/B testing and such. The easier on social ads and Google ads. With programmatic, it's a lot tougher to test. With streaming ads, I'm not even sure how you would test other than doing some kind of public opinion survey. But maybe somebody out there has a better idea than I do. But with Facebook, we've all learned that A/B testing is super important. That's largely because that's what gets more people to see it, right? Facebook shows successful content to more people than it shows, if something doesn't get engagement, they're not going to show it to as many people. On programmatic, you're buying that time and they're going to see it. So reach the same people several ways. Try to tell your story in different ways. Maybe, you can tell it with an infographic. You can tell it with a video. You can tell it with a testimonial from someone your program has helped. But, different people respond to different kinds of messaging, which is another reason to kind of mix those channels like I've been talking about. Experiment with the targeting options described above. Take the same content, use different targeting parameters, and see if you get different results. And then this is a really important one. Monitor your ad delivery. I have too many times not looked at something for a day or two, and it turns out not to be serving, whether because there's a technical bug or because I pushed the wrong button on the way out the door, right? So watch your ads, make sure they're delivering. If you're using a vendor and you see that they're not delivering, start banging on that vendor's door like that second, right? Again, you don't want to be spending money for something that's not happening. Although, of course, if your ads aren't serving, you're usually not paying. But at the same time, you're trying to get something done here. So let's look at a quick example, list building. This is Facebook for list building. A couple of different ways that folks have done this in the past. Actually, I think the one on the right was on the Post or something like that. This was when the primary was over in 2016 and Hillary was reaching out to Bernie people. And if you click the I agree, of course, you go to a page that asks for your email. Similarly, on the left, the Democratic Party, this is an older Facebook ad, you can tell from the look of it. This would click through to a petition. Now, the other way to use Facebook for building a list was to use Facebook's built-in lead generation ads, which lets someone sign up for your list without having to leave Facebook. Again, with all of the Facebook targeting restrictions lately, these may not be working as well as they used to. So sometimes just running a link to your own petition may work better. And that way you can also go beyond Facebook and look at some of these other options. But so it's quite common for organizations to test a petition on their site versus a lead generation ad and see which one is more cost effective over time. Now, here's an example of a media takeover here. You can't really see the top part, unfortunately. I didn't get that when I screenshotted it. But if you look to the right with the Planned Parenthood ad, there was a big banner across the top above the Washington Post header that, and I believe there were other Planned Parenthood ads down the page. And remember Maria Butina? Yeah, she went to prison. Now she's in the Russian parliament. That's the way the world goes. These are the kind of media takeovers I was talking about on local news sites particularly. But here, Planned Parenthood invested in the Post. Now, I don't know if I saw that because I was in DC or if it was a national one. They may well have been able or have been geo-targeting this media takeover specifically to DC to hit decision makers. Now, I'm not a decision maker, but I live here. So, but yeah, media takeovers. So just one more quick example here. This is the big project I get to work on in the fall these days. I work with a group called the Hometown Project. They recruit, they get a state partner. In this case, it was the Michigan Democratic Party. And they get celebrities who grew up in targeted state legislative districts to do ads for the Democratic candidates, and then I get to place those ads, which is a lot of fun. So this is Ernie Hudson. Some of you may remember from the original Ghostbusters. He was the fourth Ghostbuster. I actually saw him on an old Law and Order a few days ago. Yeah, I watched Law and Order. Don't tell anybody. And so the ads themselves are very cool, but the targeting bit is why I want to talk about them today. So we had targeted content for each legislative district, right? In the same way that you might have targeted content for different towns or for different demographic groups. We ran our combination of programmatic video and banner ads. And this year we're adding connected TV as a smaller component of the buy, probably down around 20%. And so the vast majority of the video ads would be served programmatically, i.e. showing up when someone's looking at a video on a website, but some of them would be showing up on Hulu, Peacock, or Freevee. We are beginning to move away from Facebook because of all of the problems that I discussed above, Facebook, Instagram, although we will probably run some, as much for the candidate and the volunteers to see as anything else. Some ad flights were targeted via custom audiences created from voter file exports. The client would give us a list of priority voters and we would hit them, but then I would broaden it using demographic data from the voter file so that I would have one set of ads targeting the custom audience and another set of ads targeting, say, Democratic leaning voters who are medium likely to go to the polls and hence need a nudge. And the goal there, as I've been talking about, is going to be 15 to 20 repetitions per targeted voter. Now, that is obviously a campaign example, but the same kind of logic can apply to advocacy-related campaigns. You've got different channels, you've got tight targeting, you've got different channels that complement each other, right? You've got targeted content, tight targeting, and then of course I'm monitoring all these as they go to make sure that they're delivering effectively and cost effectively. So thank you. So let's get to some questions. So I'm Colin Delany, epolitics.com. You can reach me at the contact information there, and you can go to ePolitics if you like and pick up a copy of the ebook. It goes into a whole lot of detail about the things we've been discussing here. I also just now put up a resource page on epolitics.com just about an hour ago, or right before the talk started, with some links to past articles. So that might be useful as well. So let's go to the chat here. Hometown sounds awesome. You are correct. It is great. I am so glad they found me. Oh, I'll note that I'm going to be at Netroots Nation in the middle of July. I'll be doing an ad training that's going to talk about some of this stuff, but a lot more things a lot more things that we haven't been able to cover here. So let's see. Let's get to Diane had a big question. Mentioned precise targeting being more effective to ensure ads are being viewed and can persuade our audience. Our ad specialist has tried to minimize because it has led to less conversions or in other words, sometimes over-targeting can be counterproductive. And I think this is a very, very, very good point. You can over-micro-target, right? Sometimes the people who are going to respond to you may not be the people that you predicted or that your data model predicted, right? So I often try a mix of things. Like I was talking about with the ads we're running in Virginia right now. The client is particularly focused on reaching African-American women over 45 in this district because of the candidate herself and just the makeup of the district and who are the, whom according to their larger political strategy, who are the targets, which is very good. But at the same time, I'm going to supplement those with broader targeting, trying to catch Democratic primary voters that might not fit into a data model, right? Or that the data model might have missed. A friend of mine says, if you're going to be, precisely targeting all of your advertising, your assumptions and your data model had better be right. If you, sometimes you're using a rifle, sometimes you're using a shotgun, right? I do like to mix and match so that I can reach some people very precisely, but I'm going to be trying to fill in the gaps with less highly targeted advertising. Are there any more questions? Right now, there is nothing else in the chat. I really want to thank all y'all for being here. I'll be sending around the recording, as I said, and we will see you next week if you have signed up for the version of this that's designed for political campaigns. So let us exit the recording now, and then we can chat. Thanks, everybody, and I'll see you next time.